In order to afford a property, how much money must you be making these days?
For a primary residence? Oh, I think it depends, right? It's interesting. You mentioned the affordability of housing. I think right now, if you look at the median home price in this country relative to the median income, it's like 4.8 times. It's the highest it's ever been. So housing is at as unaffordable of a rate relative to the median household it's been. So I think it's very much person dependent. In our opinion, when it comes to buying a house, we think that three things should hold true. You don't have to put down 20%. I think that a lot of people say you have to put down 20%. When your first house, you don't have to put down 20%. You can put down as little as 3 to 5%, depending on the type of loan you're getting. We do want you to be in the house at least for 5 to 7 years, but we don't want your total housing costs to exceed more than 25% of your gross income. So I think that's where the barrier lies. Like, what income do you need to be able to buy a home? It depends on the prices of homes in your area that you're looking at, and you need the income that would substantiate the housing is not more than 25% of your gross.
There are two asterisks I'd put with that. If you live in high cost of living area that has public transportation, you might be able to boost that, juice that number up 8% because you don't have a car loan. Most people have car loans. The other thing is if you're in a high flying career, like let's just say you're right out of school, or you're an attorney or an accountant, or somebody who's your career trajectory over the next 3 years is going to go up. You can use some projections to go, probably, to skew a little higher.
And I don't think you have to own a home. I think there's this conventional idea that you have to be a homeowner, You can be incredibly wealthy, incredibly successful, and build towards financial independence as a renter. It's a very personalized decision based on where you live.
Look at the market, because like some markets, you're crazy if you buy. I mean, we have a number of clients. The Silicon Valley, it's cheaper to rent,
way cheaper
than it is to buy. And then you just go retire somewhere.
So why are people buying there?
Well, I think some people use it as a holder of value. You know what I mean? If you have...
I just told you the majority of Americans, the only wealth they build is in their house. And so it's like a force.
And also you have outside resources. The international money, there's, corporate money. There's others that are using real estate as a holder of value, and you're in competition with that.
And if you're, you get married, you have kids, you want to start a family, you want to set roots, your family is there, and you think, oh, well, I want to be a homeowner, but I'm not going to leave this area because everyone's here. There's a lot of things that pull people towards that, but if you're going to make that decision, you need to recognize that it can be hugely detrimental to your long-term well-being if it's a poor financial decision.
And I don't know if I might have misunderstood your question, is because I think rent is so cheap in those places because a lot of those people have mortgage. I mean, if they have mortgages on the property, it's sub 4%, because then the prices were probably a third to a quarter.
Yeah,
because it wasn't that long ago that these property was much more affordable.
That's very true.
Renting is easier.
Do you still think real estate's a good way to build wealth?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be crazy.
In like your primary residence? Yeah, I would say so.
Over the long term, that's where your holding period. I know we said our checklist is 5 to 7 years. Me personally, right now, just giving an opinion, I love the rule 5 to 7 is traditionally right, but I think you have to elongate your holding period because there could be some crazy volatility with just buying.
How long? Because the average person, I think, holds their house for 11.8 years.
12 years, yeah.
I think that would probably work. I think it's at least 10 years.
But why does it build value? Well, most people buy a home, it's a levered property, right? So you're borrowing money, you have a small amount down, but the entire value of the property on average is going to increase at about the rate of inflation. So if you assume the rate of inflation is somewhere between 3 to 4%, my home value is going to increase every year at 3 to 4%. And because I'm levered, I am now amplifying the actual rate of return. So if my house, for me, cash on cash return can make 8, 10, 12% over a long time period, then yeah, it's going to build wealth, but you can't eat your house. So I wouldn't bank on that being the way that you're going to pay for your retirement living, but it shouldn't surprise people that wealth can still be
What about
built.
this argument that you're going to have a lot of boomers going into these nursing homes and having to sell their house, and all of these homes flooding the market at a time when millennials cannot afford it?
Well, you never bet against the system could change to a degree. Think about this. I've heard several proposals. What if all of a sudden, capital gains right now are capped at $500,000 on being tax-free for married couples, $250,000 for individuals. They could index that for inflation. They could change it.
Should.
They would you'd probably have a lot more houses hit the market. And you know what? But because it would be tax-free gains, potentially indexed, people might be willing to give a little bit. That can maybe make affordability, even help out a little bit because more houses would foot because it's a supply and demand thing
That's
too.
what I'm going to say, supply and demand. If all these houses hit the market, it's going to naturally drive down prices as inventory increases. As prices come down, well, now all of a sudden it's affordable for millennials or for Gen Z or whoever.
And then even the SBA has now made where residential construction qualifies for some of these favorable deals that they offer where these lines of credit are dirt cheap. I mean, I don't think residential construction has always been considered eligible for some of those SBA loans. So I know there was a huge headline that came out probably 4 months ago. I sent to every one of my home building friends. I was like, hey, you might want to go check this out. It's just like when we bought this building, the SBA was a big part of the driving factor of that is because sometimes, they're trying. I feel like, now look, I don't think the government is overall a creator of economic growth, but I do think that they can help subsidize and, spark things to a degree. You need to pay attention to what those incentives are.
I'm going to show you this. What do you think about this as a strategy to pay your mortgage? Now, really quick, every business is asking themselves the same question. How do we make AI work for us? The possibilities are limitless, but guessing is too risky, and sitting on the sidelines is not an option because one thing is certain. If you're not doing it, your competitors are already making their move.
And that's where our sponsor NetSuite by Oracle comes in. It's the #1 AI cloud ERP, trusted by over 43,000 businesses to manage everything from financials and inventory to commerce, HR, and CRM, all in one unified system.
When all of your data is in one place, your AI becomes a lot smarter. It doesn't just guess. It knows. NetSuite intelligently automates routine tasks, delivers real-time insights, and helps you make fast, confident decisions that actually help drive growth.
And it's not just an add-on, it's AI that's literally built right into the system that runs your business, helping you cut costs, improve accuracy, and stay ahead of the competition.
Whether your company is making millions or even hundreds of millions, NetSuite gives you visibility and control to keep moving forward. Honestly, if I were building a business of this size, NetSuite's the only company that I have 100% confidence in.
So if your revenues are at least in the 7 figures, get our completely free business guide, Demystifying AI, at netsuite.com/clips.
Again, the guide is free for you at netsuite.com/clips, netsuite.com/clips, with the link down below in the description. What do you think about this as a strategy to pay your mortgage?
I just last week bought $250,000 of stretch. And the reason I did it, one was just to sort of go through the experience, which I enjoy doing. But the second is I have monthly obligations. And I said, well, I have a 1.75% 30-year mortgage, right? And if I can, instead of paying down that mortgage, put it into an instrument that pays me 11.5%, that's 10x my mortgage rate. I'm essentially making money by taking the money, putting it into stretch, getting 11.5% and paying off my 1.75% mortgage.
And where is that yield coming from? Since again, you're not selling Bitcoin.
Yeah, the yield comes from us issuing shares typically into the market. So on the back end, what we're doing is MSTR, our common, right? High liquidity stock, the highest liquidity stock in the stock market, period. We're issuing shares. And we're using that proceed to basically pay off our dividend. And as long as we're issuing shares above net asset value, that's accretive to our common shareholders. And it's good for Bitcoin and it's good for stretch.
But haven't we seen this story play out though with others? Because we reacted to some content where people were going out there and buying massive houses and then doing was it stable coins or other things or these strategies. And then they all kind of, they imploded upon themselves.
I remember that. I saw.
I could probably
it
go
was
pull
Terra
our
Luna because I remember seeing a TikTok where someone said, "I'm going to borrow from here, and then I'm going to make 20% a year from over here." It's free money. Why is everyone doing
back to kind of
this?
our conversation. What's funny is how full circle because we're not unique. We all are trying to figure out how we can make money easier than everybody else. But it's back to if the market really lets you do that. I just don't believe it's possible.
Well, but let's step away from the actual investment that he was suggesting, that one. Yeah, if you're someone who has a 2.5, I mean, he said 1.75, but 2.5, 3.5, 4.5% mortgage, it's a really difficult thing to justify paying that mortgage off early because that capital likely could be better utilized somewhere else. Even if you're just buying a boring old index fund that's going to make, 9, 10% annualized, if I can make 9 or 10% over the long term and I'm only paying over here 3.5, 4.5, even 5.5%, his strategy still works. It's not 10x, but it's still, a 2x rate of return or whatever that number may be. I don't know about the actual investment he's suggesting, but the idea that if I have low interest debt, I shouldn't be super aggressive in paying it off makes all the sense in the world. It's why in the financial order of operations, the very last step, step 9 for us would be prepaying low interest debt. I leave that as long as possible so my money can work for me as hard as possible.
I get nervous when somebody talks about how stable or safe something is, but then tells me it's going to make 11%. I mean, it doesn't pass the sniff test.
Or
I mean, I've been around long enough for the Bernie Madoff
conversation.
I mean, I've been doing content since 2006. And I remember one of my favorite shows. It never was really popular, but you were involved with this too. Is I pulled Bernie Madoff's regulatory filings. There were so many red flags in there. If you just go read his ADV.
What did you see?
Well, it was just like
when you deposit your money, you deposit it to Bernie Madoff securities, and then the statements you received were from Bernie Madoff securities, and then the reporting that he gave was there was no check and balance. There was no Fidelity, Vanguard, Charles Schwab, and there were certain disclosures you were signing off on. There wasn't any sort of mark-to-market reporting required. It was
the small accounting firm that was the accounting firm listed. It wasn't one of the Big Four at the time. I think it was still Big Four back then instead of Big Six, but it was none of the household name accounting firms that you typically see with public companies or big companies. It was just all kind of weird stuff that he was doing that just, the only reason people were doing it is because a little bit of greediness that, hey, this guy was making greater than 10% every year, and it felt like it was somewhat guaranteed, so why not get in there and get some of that?
You turn a blind eye when something seems too good to be true and you experience it for a moment. You let your rationality and logic fly out the window.
I can understand how the S&P 500 is average 10% a year because there's risk and reward tied to it. When somebody touts something on its safety and then tells me the same return as the S&P 500 that has risk associated with it, it makes my spidey senses go.
So what do you think is the ideal risk-free return? Are you just looking at the Treasury and we're talking
that's
3
what
to 5%?
most people... We're talking 3 to 5%, depending upon where we are with inflation in the treasuries.
Really good proxy. If whatever you're making on your cash and a good high yield is a pretty good proxy for what the risk-free rate is. Because I would argue that's about as close to risk-free as you're going to get.